What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Observant Lineman. I am your Observant Lineman, Uche Nwaneri. Do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel, hit the bell notification so you can get notified each and every time that I drop a new video, and let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below in the comments section. Now let's get straight to it. I'm gonna talk about grading out the current hires of NFL coaches since the end of the regular season in the NFL. We all know that there have been some big splashy hires that have been made. Obviously the one with the Cowboys and also the one with the Panthers. I'm gonna go through each and every hiring and talk about my feelings and grade them out based on what I know as a player, based on the things that I've experienced myself, and based on some of the factors that we come to expect when looking at these hires each year in the NFL. So let's start this off with Matt Rhule from Baylor. Matt Rhule is a guy who took a 2-10 Temple team in 2013 and built that up into a 10-4 Temple team in 2015 out in the AAC conference in college football, and then moved along to Baylor, a program that was mired in controversy at the time, and built that team into a contender in the Big 12. And that has garnered him a lot of praise and a lot of hype coming from the college ranks. He's obviously been hired by the Carolina Panthers as their new head coach by the owner of the Carolina Panthers. And to be honest, I don't necessarily have a problem with this hire. I think it's a safe hire that the Carolina Panthers made, looking for somebody to bring a new kind of energy, new kind of life to the franchise. Obviously, there's going to be questions about what he can do with Cam Newton, whether or not he's going to commit to even keeping Cam Newton. But at the end of the day, let's take a look at what he's done. And in my opinion, I think that even though this is probably the splashiest of the hires, this really is a hire that I think presents more red flags for any franchise than you'll find on any of the other coaching hires in the NFL at this time. And I'm going to tell you why. First reason being, when you look at the level of competition that he faced at Temple, obviously in the AAC conference, that is not a conference that is considered amongst the top in the Power 5. That's not a conference that is considered in the same breath as the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, it's the Pac-12. It's just not one of those conferences, obviously. So with what he did there, he was allowed to move forward and be the head coach of Baylor. Now, granted, Baylor is a part of the Big 12, and the Big 12 is considered one of the Power 5 conferences. But let's be real here about really what's happening with Baylor. Baylor was a team that he built up. This is a team that had a substantial lead over the University of Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, where Baylor at halftime looked as if they were operating on all cylinders. And by all stretches of the imagination, had they won that game at that same level of performance against OU, then there would be much less to worry about with this hiring by the Panthers. But when you look at what happened, when you look at how they ended up losing that game to OU, that just kind of goes to show that there hasn't been enough progress in Baylor for him to be able to push them over the top to get that Big 12 championship. And I think that says a lot about what a head coach's muster is when they have a team that is in a position to be a winner in the same breath as maybe you look at the Atlanta Falcons and their situation against the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl a few years back, having a massive lead and then having an utter meltdown in the second half to the point where you end up losing the game. That has to be a massive red flag for these Carolina Panthers. And when you look at that in a conference where that team lost to OU and then OU went on to be utterly decimated, utterly destroyed by LSU. Now, granted, they had the best quarterback in the country. They have the best team in the country. But at the same time, as a Power 5 conference team, for OU to go out there and get completely dismantled in the manner that they did, what does that really say about the job that Baylor did in choking at over a 20-point lead at halftime to OU, to the Sooners, and not being able to come out with that win? That means that you have a team that wasn't ready for the big time. And to me, that leaves a lot to be desired in what you're getting with Matt Rhule. I'm not saying that he won't be a success in Carolina. I'm saying that this one probably has the highest risk of all of the hirings in the NFL. Not only that, you also have to look at the kind of contract that the Carolina Panthers gave Matt Rule. They gave this guy a 7-year, $60 million contract with incentives to build up to $70 million. And on top of that, also a $6 million buyout from the Baylor Bears in order to attain him as their head coach. That is a hefty investment for someone who has no experience at the professional level. That is an investment on a long-term scale that the majority of the NFL would probably be very hesitant to give somebody who doesn't have any experience at all, because you are married to that coach for 7 years. And if it doesn't pan out, which usually you'll find out in the first 2 to 3 years, whether this guy is actually going to be able to get in the right kind of draft picks, get in the right kind of culture, have the right staff, and kind of set the team on the course that it's going to build upon for the coming seasons, that is quite a long time, in my opinion, to commit yourself to somebody who has of yet been a coach on the NFL level. So that in and of itself is another red flag for the hiring of Matt Rule. So for Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers, I'm going to give their hiring grade a C+. Now, what's probably the most controversial of all the hires from the NFL teams since the end of the regular season would be that of Joe Judge from the New York Giants. The New York Giants have signed Joe Judge to be the head coach of their franchise moving forward. And for a lot of people, this is a head scratcher. For me, not so much. There's a little bit of a rhyme to the reason here, and there's a little strategy to be considered when you're thinking about the dynamics of an NFL franchise. Now, bear with me here, because it takes a little bit of explaining to kind of get underneath this and let you guys see exactly where I'm going with my thoughts on this hire. Joe Judge is a guy who has been part of multiple championship franchises. One being in college with Alabama as an assistant there. He earned multiple national championship wins with Alabama, and from there went on to be the special teams coordinator for the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick. Now, word on the street is when Bill Belichick wasn't in the room, this was the guy who had a lot of control in New England. And whether that's true or not, I think that's besides the point. I think you really have to look at the position that he was in as a special teams coordinator on a team like the New England Patriots that thrived off of solid, consistent special teams play. This guy was the man who was the head of all of that. Not only that, when you look at the position of a special teams coordinator, there is a lot that is required of this kind of coordinator to build rapport with players who are on the bubble on a franchise, players who are interchangeable from week in and week out. And in that situation, you have to have the kind of planning, strategy, and motivation to really get guys to play on a unit of the team that they don't really want to play on. Guys don't get drafted to play on special teams. Guys don't sign contracts as free agents to play on special teams. Guys sign contracts and get drafted to play on offense and defense. Special teams for players generally is one of those units that if you're a guy who has any plans of being in the starting lineup or in the rotation with starters, you want to avoid it at all costs. So you are heading up and controlling a unit of the team that, while is probably the least liked in terms of guys wanting to be on that unit, is also probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, X factor within a game that can turn the tide at any moment during the course of a game. And to have players who are ready to play at that position, to play on those special teams units and perform at a high level consistently, week in and week out, it takes a lot of motivation. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of control. It takes an understanding of how to get the most out of guys who aren't necessarily married or committed to the franchise itself because of the constant interchangeability of the players that you have on that unit. So a lot of times you're working with players who may be changing week in and week out. You're having to learn new personalities. You're having to remember names, which usually special team coaches don't even remember a lot of the guys' names that are on their unit if they're not core guys who have been there for the majority of the season. This is a unit that takes a special kind of coach to operate and control. And to have that kind of control and to have that kind of planning to put all of these things into motion on a weekly basis, that takes somebody who has a supreme level of knowledge and understanding of what they want as a coach and how they want things to be operated. And it doesn't hurt that you're coming from a team that has had 9 Super Bowl appearances over the past 10 years. That is pedigree. And when you look at a franchise like the New York Giants, a premier franchise in the NFL, for better or for worse, they haven't had great seasons in the past few years, but still a premier franchise nonetheless. They're not going to make a decision on somebody like this unless they also understand what he actually is in terms of value to a franchise like New England over the years that he was there. So for the hiring with the New York Giants, I'm going to say that the Joe Judge hiring is a B+ score in my opinion. Next up, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mike McCarthy signed to the Dallas Cowboys as their next head coach by the owner of the Cowboys, Jerry Jones. And while I have talked extensively about my views on this coaching hire in and of itself, there is still a lot to dissect. And at the end of the day, while I was questioning whether or not this was just going to be another updated version of the Jason Garrett situation that we have witnessed over the past decade, there is still a lot to be looked at and a lot to be admired about the decision to bring Mike McCarthy on as the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. At the end of the day, the biggest element of success for the Dallas Cowboys is going to fall upon whether or not Jerry Jones is going to allow Mike McCarthy the flexibility and the control as the head coach to motivate, build, and execute his vision of this team for the Dallas Cowboys. It can't be the vision of Jerry Jones. It has to be the vision of Mike McCarthy. He has shown that he can be an extremely innovative offensive mind when he is in a position to have that kind of control over the offense. And as a head coach, I've heard that there is a lot of true grit that Mike McCarthy does possess. And I don't doubt that he has the ability to be a great coach for the Cowboys. What I do doubt is that he will have the flexibility and the space to operate as a great coach for the Cowboys. Now, we know about the weapons that the Cowboys have. We know about the talent that this franchise is flush with from top to bottom. But at the end of the day, there has to be that motivating factor. There has to be that factor of control and stability from one man and one man only, the head coach, in order for this franchise to be able to move onward and upward to the levels and the potential that we all seem to year in and year out anoint them with and sit them near the top of the hype machine for all teams in their chase for Super Bowl glory. So for the Cowboys, it all boils down to Jerry Jones. And for me, I'm going to give this hire a B-, because at the end of the day, for it to move from a B- to an A is going to depend on solely what happens with Jerry Jones when things get tough, when there's adversity. How will he respond? Will he allow this coach to operate and handle this team the way that he sees fit? Or will he make the headlines? Will he go out and speak to the media? Will he have that same influence that has for so long been a shadow over that franchise and kind of held them back from being able to move forward as a team to be reckoned with in the NFL? So a B- for the Dallas Cowboys with the potential to move up to an A, which will be seen and time will tell over the course of the season for Mike McCarthy. And finally, we come to probably a signing that has kind of fallen, behind a lot of the news headlines and the splash of all these hirings since the end of the NFL season. We're going to look at the Washington Redskins and their hire of Ron Rivera, the former head coach from the Carolina Panthers, and Jack Del Rio, the former head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, former head coach of the Oakland Raiders, former defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to take a look at what this combo signing brings to this Washington Redskins franchise. Having personally been coached by Jack Del Rio, I can say that for his part in the signing, for the signing of Jack Del Rio as their defensive coordinator, I think that is an absolutely exceptional signing for the Washington Redskins. This is a guy who has a proven record of building very good defenses, building defenses that actually believe in what he brings to that unit of the field, both in culture and both in credibility, being is that Jack Del Rio was also a player in the NFL for an extended period of time. Ron Rivera, I have to say a lot of the same for him. It seems like he had a lot of buy-in from the players in Carolina in his time there. And he also took them to a Super Bowl. He also took them to the playoffs multiple years. And the guy has shown that he allows his players to do what they do best, and he tries to custom fit his team to the skill sets that they excel at. And I think that when you look at his overall persona, this is a guy who has control over his team. This is a guy who is willing to step up and be accountable for his team, but also push his team and try and get the most that he can out of his players on any given week. And there can't be enough said to the luxury of having a coach who has that kind of control, commands that kind of respect, and is very committed in his values as a coach, while at the same time being able to relate to the players that he is in station with. And for me, I think that of all of the signings over the course of this signing period since the end of the regular season, the Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio combination is actually the best signing that will produce dividends almost immediately for this franchise. Again, there's one factor that has to be considered when you think about what is going to amount to success for this franchise. And it is absolutely going to depend on whether or not Dan Snyder is able to keep himself away from the workings of this team and keep his name out of the headlines. Allow your coach to operate and allow him to get the best he can out of his team, and you're going to see a franchise that will likely see the most in terms of the return that they're going to get from a proven head coach on both ends, a proven head coach and a proven defensive coordinator who both have head coaching experience, who both will be able to build a synergy that will lead to a more cohesive unit in Washington. So for the Washington Redskins, I'm going to give their signing of Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio an A, a solid A. That is where I think they stand with the hiring that they made. They made it early, but I absolutely think that they made the best signing out of this entire group of new head coaches. Let me know what you guys think. Leave your comments down below. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. I am your observant lineman, Uche Nwaneri. I appreciate you guys very much for taking your time out to watch this video, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.